Good afternoon, Monday, November 10th. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. Maronite Patriarch Rai continues lashing out against Lebanese politicians for cold-bloodedly violating the constitution. UN envoy to Syria, Staffan de Mistura, says Syrian President Assad is ready to study a UN plan to freeze fighting in Aleppo. And in Egypt, Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, the most active armed insurgency, pledges allegiance to ISIS. Maronite Patriarch Rai is releasing statements again. He continues to fiercely criticize Lebanese politicians, accusing them of deliberately provoking vacuums in state institutions and violating the constitution to serve personal interests. Speaking at the opening of the 8th Conference of the Council of Catholic Patriarchs and Bishops, Rai accused the Lebanese politicians of what he said cold-bloodedly violating the constitution and implied that the political leadership of the country has lost its raison d'être. Rai recently returned from a visit to Australia and said the Lebanese diaspora there were distressed by the decadence and dissolution of Lebanon resulting from bad governance. Warning that the unity and dignity of the family in Lebanon is threatened, Rai called on authorities to initiate economic and social development programs aimed at preserving the family's integrity. Patrice Paoli, the French ambassador to Lebanon, has met with Foreign Minister Gebran Bassil to brief him on the progress to deliver French arms to the Lebanese army, assuring him that the Saudi-funded $3 billion deal is proceeding smoothly. The two also discussed other ways of extending France's support to Lebanon, with Paoli stressing his country's commitment to help Lebanon in international institutions such as the UN Security Council and the European Union. Saudi Arabia and France last week signed an agreement under which French arms worth $3 billion would be delivered to the Lebanese army and increase its capacity to combat terrorism. Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblat is urging Syria's Druze to relinquish all links with Bashar al-Assad's regime and join the revolution. He made similar calls last week, urging the Druze to stay away from the regime, but went further this time by calling on them to join the opposition, saying it is time for the community to make a bold decision. The comments come after clashes broke out last week in Druze villages on the Syrian side of Mount Hermon between rebels and pro-government forces, killing at least 31 pro-government people. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says he is ready to study a UN plan to freeze fighting in the northern city of Aleppo. President Assad has been informed by UN envoy Staffan de Mistura of the main points of his initiative, saying the statement issued between the two men and while they held talks in Damascus. It is de Mistura's second visit to Syria since he was appointed peace envoy in July. On October 30th, de Mistura put forward an action plan for Syria that proposed to freeze fighting in local areas to allow for aid deliveries and to lay the groundwork for peace talks. According to the Syrian presidency Facebook page, Assad emphasized the importance of Aleppo, which rebels and the army have been fighting over since July of 2012. The leader of the Islamic State organization won the allegiance of Egypt's deadliest militant group as Iraqi authorities investigate reports he had been killed or wounded in a U.S. airstrike. Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, which has carried out a strike of deadly attacks from its stronghold in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, says it is pledging its loyalty to ISIS's caliph, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Speculation has swirled that Baghdadi, whose group has seized large parts of Iraq and Syria, was killed or wounded in a U.S. airstrikes on jihadist leaders in northern Iraq on Friday, but officials say there has been no confirmation. However, in a recording posted on its Twitter account, Ansar Beit al-Maqdis promised its loyalty to ISIS and urged other Muslims to do the same. The American president says in a pre-recorded interview aired yesterday that the fight against the Islamic State group had entered a new phase. Barack Obama was speaking on the 60th anniversary of the CBS Sunday news program Face the Nation, where he answered a series of questions from host Bob Schieffer. Take a look.
Phase one was getting an Iraqi government that was inclusive and credible, and we now have done that. And so now what we've done is, rather than just try to halt ISIL's momentum, we're now in a position to start going on some offense. As Commander-in-Chief, I'm never going to say never, but what the commanders who presented the plan to me say is that we may actually see fewer troops over time, because now we're seeing coalition members starting to partner with us on the training and assist effort. I tend not to comment on any communications that I have with various leaders. I've got a whole bunch of channels where we're communicating to various leaders around the world. Let me speak more broadly about the policies vis-a-vis Iran. We have two big interests in Iran that are short-term, and then we've got a long-term interest. Our number one priority with respect to Iran is making sure they don't get a nuclear weapon. The second thing that we have an interest in is that Iran has influence over Shia, both in Syria and in Iraq, and we do have a shared enemy in ISIL. But I've been very clear publicly and privately, we are not connecting in any way the nuclear negotiations from the issue of ISIL. We're not coordinating with Iran on ISIL.
Coming up next, David Hury is in our studios and he is talking to us about his new book. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news here on Future Television. Author David Hury is our guest today. He was born in Paris and has already published books about and all revolving approximately about Beirut. He took part in the latest Beirut Book Fair, an annual event bringing together authors from many corners of the world, and it's hosted here in Lebanon. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Your last book is the Beirut book. We talked about this a little bit before the newscast. You said here that this was created, the idea came to you last year at last year's book fair, and what you did is use very popular quotations, whether it's from singers or movies or authors, and substitute a word in those quotations with Beirut.
Yes.
So, why?
I love this city, so I thought, I was looking for some new ideas for illustrations for the Beirut Prince Collective. I had an idea to make some new posters last summer, and I was listening to a song from U2, Where the Streets Have No Name, and I thought, okay, this sentence is perfect. It fits for Beirut. So,
because the streets here have no names, right?
Actually, they have names, but people don't know them. So. I listened to other songs, read some books. I thought about movies that I like, and I picked some sentences or quotations that can be applied to Beirut if I just change one word and put Beirut instead.
I know you're a writer, but it's very much an artist's book. It takes a lot of artistry to put this together. You've been here, you're Parisian, you've been here for almost 20 years.
18, almost.
Almost, yeah, that's true, but I'm quoting you in your foreword of the book. You said, and I quote, "To give, receive, and take in almost 20 years, Beirut has given me a lot and retaken a lot."
That's true.
The Beirut book would thus seem almost as the last tribute of a man to a city that saw him be reborn. Almost. So some people would say almost doesn't count. What have you taken from Beirut?
Actually, I was given a lot from Beirut and retaken. Like, it's a hard question, actually. I had a beautiful experience in Beirut. It's almost 18 years, so I think for now, maybe I have to write now about something else about Beirut. Maybe I have done all I can do about Beirut.
But how do you compare it with other places? You're from Paris. Paris is a very big city. It's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. How can you compare the two?
Beirut is so different, so special. When you come from Europe, it's like you feel free here. Maybe because of the chaos, because, okay, it's a cliche, but everyone talks about, the way of driving, or there is a lot of examples like this. So when you came from old cities like Paris or London, where there is maybe too many rules, living in Beirut is like wow.
It's
nice.
Liberating.
Yeah,
it's liberating.
For
there
sure.
are what David's referring to is that there are a lot of road problems here in Beirut. A lot of lights are not put in place. People driving in different ways, and they say if you can drive here, well, you can drive anywhere in the world.
That's true. maybe it's a little worse in Cairo than Beirut, I think.
Okay, well,
Beirut is not the #1 for this.
We'll talk about Cairo another day.
Yeah.
About this book, it has a lot of quotations from different parts of the world and in different languages, and
Yes.
you've substituted a word to Beirut. And I asked you about if there was one original quotation that
There's only
belonged
one.
to Beirut. And you said there was only one, and I'm going to read it. It's from Jan Morris. It says, "Beirut is a phenomenon, beguiling perhaps, but quite impossible." You chose this specific one. Why?
It says it all. It's an impossible city, but it's an amazing city. And living here is like a good school for the rest of my life, I think. So, yes, it's an impossible city, but we all love them. We all love it, sorry.
Yes, you chose to stay here despite everything that's impossible about it.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about this Beirut Book Fair. You've taken part of it a couple of times now. How can you explain to people watching what the Beirut Book Fair has to offer, and if there's something that it doesn't offer, what more can it offer?
The Beirut Book Fair is a major event for French language people in Beirut. So every year. So we have the chance to see and to meet and to talk to authors and writers or photographers coming from France, Vietnam. There was a lot of people this year. So it's I think it's a really good way and a good opportunity to meet new people, because you know, I won't be really original about it, but Beirut is like a system which can live without people about. So getting new experience, getting new points of view about the city. I met, for example, last weekend, I met two writers coming from Marseille in the south of France, and it was I was like a child listening to them, because I felt that I had something to learn from them.
You had something to learn from them.
Definitely.
So it brings a lot of people from all over the world together, and it happens here in Lebanon. Do you think there's something we can better with the Beirut Book Fair? Is there something we can do better?
It can always be better. You know, I remember the first one I attended, it was in '97. It was in a different location. It was at Beirut Hall, I think, in Sinelfil. And it was a complete different story. There was a lot of photo exhibitions, there were concerts, and it's not the same now. So maybe it can go back in time to improve the different kind of events gathered in the book fair.
Make it a little more entertaining, is what you're saying.
Definitely.
We're going to have you back here, David Houry, so you can tell us more about Beirut, and we can go into depth about how it has changed over the years. That's all the time we have for today. On that note, let me thank you for being with us, author David Houry, and let me remind our audience of today's headlines. Maronite Patriarch Sharadai continues to lash out against Lebanese politicians for cold-bloodedly violating the Constitution. His words. UN envoy to Syria, Staffan de Mistura, says Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is ready to study the UN plan to freeze fighting in the northern city of Aleppo. And in Egypt, Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, the most active armed insurgency group in the country, pledges allegiance to ISIS. Thank you for watching us here on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nofal, wishing you all a good night.